For those of us who live and breathe crypto, Bitwise is a name you want to know. They've been in the game since 2017 and now manage over 10 billion in crypto assets across 30 different solutions. Index funds, Bitcoin and crypto, equity ETFs, on-chain solutions, you name it, Bitwise does it. But here's what I really recommend checking out. Their weekly CIO memo. Every week, CIO Matt Hogan breaks down what's happening in crypto, like why Bitcoin's up or down, what the big institutions are doing, and the stories flying under the radar. It's sharp, it's free, and honestly, it's one of the best reads in crypto. Find it at bitwiseinvestments.com/CIO memo. Again, bitwiseinvestments.com/CIO memo.
So here we are, Token 2049. It really is one of the most energetic, incredible events. Speakers from all around the world and visitors from every country you can ever imagine, all trying to learn something together, something new, this exciting world of crypto and technology. It's where you go and make friends, lifelong friends. And what's so nice is to see people with big smiles on their faces, happy to be here and happy to be together. So hopefully see you next time in Singapore. Real Vision will be there. I look forward to seeing you all.
Hello, we are back for another episode of REKT Vision. And as is tradition on a Friday, the whole market is dumping right ahead of the holiday weekend. I think it happens more Fridays than not at the moment. We have Ejaaz back on by popular demand. We had a great show where we touched upon macro, crypto, AI. We're going to try and run it back this week. Ejaaz, thanks a lot for coming back on the show.
Thanks, man. I'm super excited. Yeah, I've just gotten into the habit of not looking at my portfolio on a Friday morning, or actually at any point in Friday. The weekend starts early.
That is the key, I tend to find. I think by Monday, normally everything's all back fine again, but it feels as though, I don't know if it's market makers or if it's just CT losing their mind on a Friday, but it doesn't feel like we like to own any risk over the weekend. And then Sunday, equity markets open again and everything feels fine. Today's move, I mean, when you last came on the show, I think ETH was around 3,500, maybe 3,000. We said, that was the trade, and ETH went all the way up to basically 5K. Bitcoin actually headed lower during that period, and Solana had a bit more of a recent run, kind of moving back up towards 210. So that's held on okay. It does feel like a slight inflection point, I would say, in the market right now. We had an PC inflation data come out, which was kind of in line, but the market kind of showed its hand and just kind of went lower. Bitcoin's 108.5K. ETH is hanging on to around 4,300, and Solana's at 208. What's your view here now? Because there's been maybe a bit of a shift in the DAT trade. There's been a bit of a shift in the ETFs. What's your view on the market and maybe in particular ETH?
Sure. So there's two perspectives here, in my opinion. If you are a Zodiac crypto enthusiast, you would look at the 4-year cycle, right? And splat it on a chart and try and figure out where this might be going. And if you line it up, it's kind of convenient because this is typically the time where BTC-D or BTC Dominance tops, right? And we're kind of starting to see that, right? ETH is usually kind of like the last one to go, or last one of the majors to go. It's maintaining its kind of like higher price up there near its all-time high. And Solana is kind of like pushing itself towards the previous all-time high that it reached. I think it was like earlier this year or last year. I can't remember when, right? So we're starting to see that BTC-D kind of dominance happen. But then again, you could also attribute a lot of this market movement to all the digital asset treasury stuff that is going on. And if I'm being honest with you, I think at this stage for BTC and ETH in particular, it's an institutional game. And I don't think it's anything more complex than the dude is buying billions and billions of ETH every week. And I think that's where we go from here. Yeah, I think we'll probably see the same for Sol as well.
Yeah, I think I saw some takes that, because it was a pretty violent move in ETH, and like Bitcoin, which took a while, there's been a lot of big holders that probably sold down their holdings over many years. ETH, because it was languishing for so while, it felt as though maybe this might have been a time where a couple of big holders took a print, even though there's been billions of dollars of buying. But I do think that ETH looks very strong for the medium term. This ETH DAT trade actually feels very much stronger even than the Bitcoin one in terms of percentage accumulated.
And it's not just institutions that are thinking that, right, Mando? Like we saw someone or an entity or one person exchange almost $2.4 billion worth of BTC to ETH. So it's crypto OGs as well as institutions that are kind of making these kinds of moves, and I think we're going to start to see this trend kind of develop a little more over the next couple of weeks at least.
Yeah, so there was a big wallet in the last week, which had, I think, 26 billion of Bitcoin. And I don't know how much of it they converted, but a decent chunk got converted into ETH, and they did it via Hyperliquid. So it was a pretty public way of doing it. So that, I think, rattled a few people. And there was this idea that, oh, maybe this is the time to rotate into ETH. Personally, I've been doing the opposite. I've been buying Bitcoin here. I like Bitcoin dominance into September, which is normally a pretty volatile period. And I continue to think that, like, although I may not own it for more than a couple of months, as in like my major bit of my portfolio, I just think you always have good chances to buy dips when volatility picks up. Today's another kind of a day for that. And we've started to see ETH slightly underperform, at least on the L1s. I think Bitcoin ETH is kind of still hanging out in a pretty tight range here around 0.04. But at least in terms of the L1s, there's been a bit of rotation over to Solana, which also has a bit of a DAT trade about it too. Are you more constructive on the Solana side of things?
I actually am, but it depends on time range. So I actually think moving part of your portfolio to BTC within the next couple of weeks is a good idea, Mando. And the reason why is, historically, September has been pretty volatile in the sense that there's always been some kind of major dip in September. It's actually pretty consistent if you look over the last 7 years or something crazy like that. I was staring at a chart a few days ago. There's always like this big dip, but it's one that kind of like supposedly bounces back. Again, this is statistical zodiac type stuff. But when it comes to kind of like the longer term trade, I think Solana is primarily at a good place right now. It's been ranging for about something crazy like 300 days now since it kind of topped near $300 earlier this year, I believe. And now we have some of the DAT companies that are raising. I saw that Pantera and a few others. I think collectively they're raising like $2.5 billion or $2.4 billion. So I think we're going to start seeing that kind of conversion from BTC and ETH into Sol. And that's why Sol's been kind of outperforming or maintaining its kind of like break above 200. I think it's at like 210 right now.
Yeah, it does feel like that's been the main narrative. I would say that those DATs feel slightly different to the ETH DATs to me. If you've noticed, they've been always alongside big VC firms, which have big bags of Solana. Part of it from the FTX bankruptcy, they bought them through that, or part of them have held it for a long time. And a lot of these are gifting some of these assets to kind of help with the initial NAV of these vehicles. So I don't know if it's going to mean as much, at least at first, buying on the market of these sort of assets. What happened with Bitmine and even Sharplink, I don't think Joe Lubin gave any ETH for Sharplink, or if he did, it wasn't a huge amount. They actually raised capital and went out and bought on the market ETH, which I think was quite a big deal. You can do these DATs, and it's actually just another way of a VC getting out of their kind of existing bag. I've noticed here with these Solana ones. So I do like Solana here because of that trade, because I do think it's, like you said, it's been raining for a long time. Feels like ETH did hit an all-time high, and so you would kind of expect maybe a little bit of a rotation to these other L1s. And it feels like that DAT trade at least has got somewhat of a story behind it. I also think the ETFs will be coming in the Q4 or maybe late Q3 for Solana. So there's like that story. Maybe I don't know if the actual fruition of it will be that strong.
I was gonna say that if you're a major right now, top three, BTC, ETH, Sol, And I know there are others, but those are the three that I kind of like consider majors. You need an institutional bid at this point. You're kind of like too large, and you need kind of volume coming from elsewhere. Solana lacks a Michael Saylor type figure. You know, ETH's got Tom Lee. We need that kind of a figure to step up. I saw some opinions floating around on X. Some were saying, hey, maybe the Solana Foundation themselves should bid. I strongly disagree. You need someone, I'm left curving this. You need someone on CNBC in a suit that tells the story amazingly, right? Whatever, the decentralized NASDAQ or whatever that pitch is. We haven't seen it yet. So if you're bidding Sol now, you're betting basically that someone's going to step up soon.
Yeah, there will be somebody. There will be somebody. I do think it needs to be somebody that is also familiar or known by TradFi markets already. Like you could pick one of the CT more native people like Mert, for example, but I think it's got to be someone already in TradFi to kind of tell this story. So I agree.
My bet is Chamath or someone like that. I know he's not traditional TradFi, but he's spoken about Solana so many times on the All In podcast. I feel like he might step up. Yeah,
maybe he was doing his own DAT, wasn't he? Maybe he will be the kingmaker of something like this. But yes, it will be someone like that who kind of touches mainstream and crypto. You did mention one thing before, which was this big trade that happened from Bitcoin to ETH. I think the second bit about that is it happened on Hyperliquid, and Hyperliquid is been a trade which a lot of people have been following now during this cycle. This week they flipped Robinhood's trading volume for the month, which I thought was a pretty wild figure, and it got sent to me by a couple of people from my ex-TradFi days. This is a coin which is trading at $45 billion FDV, but a much smaller current market cap, I think around $15 billion. They do have some unlock coming in 3 months, but a very interesting story. They're now buying back Hype with 99% of their fees. So it's around $5 to $10 million a day of buying pressure going into Hype right now, which is a pretty crazy figure. What's your view on Hype? The other story that did come out this week was that there may be now a path for some of the bigger offshore exchanges to come back to the US, and Hype dipped a little bit on that, and BNB's hit an all-time high. But do you think Hype is still a trade for this cycle, or are you wary of it into the unlocks? Do you think they're like changing the face of crypto?
Okay, so obviously I'll preface this with saying the following is very much my opinion, but here's how I kind of like see the lay of the land. And there are many moving pieces for Hyperliquid specifically. So number one, I'm pretty bullish Hype. And the simple reason is it's the number one crypto app in the world right now. There is no second best, right? Depending on how you classify what an app is. As you said, they're earning tens of millions of dollars of fees weekly. They're converting daily fees straight into a buyback of Hype. And their revenue run rate is like something crazy, like $2 to $5 billion per year. And it's a really good product, Mando. I don't know if you use it regularly. I use it regularly, and it's great. I know that if there is a new asset that is breaking or trending on Twitter, there's likely a perps market for it on Hyperliquid. So the team executes really well. The user interface is so easy to use. And most importantly, they can transact super high volume on chain. Typically, that hasn't been the case. Typically, there's been some issue. Fees have spiked and very volatile. So, it only becomes a whales game, or it breaks down and you can't really use the product or rely on the product. Hyperliquid has kind of dismissed both of those concerns, right? It's been a super consistent product. But then you mentioned this news that kind of broke or is rumored to break. I read a paper, an official document. I assume it's official. A lot of people took that and said, oh, okay, they're going to make offshore exchanges like Binance, OKX, Bybit legal for American users to use. I think that is one interpretation of the paper. Just to be specific, they never say that in the actual document.
I agree.
What they're actually more likely, what they actually say is we're going to make it easier for American founders who are kind of trying to do the same thing to allow American users to legally do this, basically. So ironically, that's bullish Hyperliquid and the founding team, because Jeff is American. I know he's not based in the US right now, but he's American. He graduated from American university. So I think they're trying to encourage, and this is a trend that we've seen with the presidential team and cabinet so far this year. They're trying to encourage more onshore kind of participation, and they're kind of like softening the restraints that tech founders and finance founders have here to build kind of crazy stuff, right? And then the third point that I'll make is don't dismiss the fact that $2.4 billion was seamlessly executed on Hyperliquid. And if you don't think other institutions and whales are looking at that and thinking, I can do that anonymously without KYC, and that's just one use case to use Hyperliquid, but the other one is I can just use one crypto wallet and I don't need to kind of send stuff to Bybit or Binance. That is a very attractive opportunity. If I were to argue the other side, I would say a lot of people trust Binance and Bybit, right? It's a traditional exchange, but we've seen that kind of trust get hurt in the past, right? With FTX and a few others. And obviously, these are Asian exchanges. They're not culpable to American laws to some extent. You could get kind of screwed over, for lack of a better term. So there are two sides, but I think this is bullish Hyperliquid over the long term.
I actually agree with that take, which is that I think the perpetual swap is kind of the financial asset for the future. You can see it's now going a bit more mainstream. It's being used in many different other forms, and Hyperliquid is now going to be one of the number one places for that. It's made that very clear from a decentralized fashion. And I read that kind of similar to like you did. It looked like they were basically saying there's a path for reshoring here, rather than we're going to allow US users to operate on foreign exchanges. And I think Binance has a US arm, but it's largely been gutted. I thought this was maybe slightly like Justin Sun coded, like maybe HTX has some sort of path now to having a US onshore exchange. But the idea that this was suddenly just going to be in the end of Hyperliquid, that we've seen that quite a lot. It's a very popular take. Now, what I do think...
I mean, forget about Hyperliquid. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, forget about Hyperliquid. Coinbase is screwed if that happens, right? Like the competition just comes on. Sorry, what were you saying, Mando?
I was just going to say, I still do think people should be aware of the unlocks, because I think this is a great trade, and it's often always matched against current market cap. But 50 billion puts it in an FDV basis like above Sui and below Solana right now, right? It's like it's sitting there, and I think that's probably fair. But when you if you have an unlock, I think it's in December or maybe November. It's
November.
It's a decent amount. A lot of people have said that the team would never sell. And I kind of agree with that. I think they'll probably end up like staking it in some form. But there are core contributors, I think, who are going to get paid a little bit. And I think that I'm still wary of that, let's say in September and October, because I think whether it's a big unlock or not, that will be on the timeline. And what we've seen with Hyperliquid is one headline, people just freak out and they're like, oh, the trade's over. You know what I mean? And I feel like we're going to have a bit of that. So I think it's a really good trade. I'm not sure if it's the best trade for the next couple of months, but it did hit an all-time high this week. It hit 51 and then got smashed right back down to, I think, 44. It's now at 45, just on that one headline, basically, which kind of tells you it's a little bit fragile. And I think it'll still be strong, but maybe that fragility will come back at some stage. Let's change tack a little bit, because I know you do a great show yourself. I know you're aligned with the Bankless guys as well, but Limitless is its name, and I watch it every single week. But I think one of the themes that you've been kind of getting at recently, and it's mainly around AI and like maybe the future of tech a little bit, is this fight between the Mag 7 for AI, and the real theme that I've kind of seen for the last month is Google. And Google just pulling away to a certain extent on various different fronts versus the others, whether it's on their LLM, their image generator, their text to video, and now they've got the phone out. I wanted to just kind of get your take on that. Is that something that you've broadly seen? I know everyone's spending a ton of money, and like people catch up in this game pretty quickly. But it's been interesting to see how strong Google has come with all their different models and the hardware part of the market.
So I research this stuff day in and day out. We actually had the guy that created Google's AI, Gemini, on our show last week, and we had an interview, and he broke the news about their new image model and a bunch of other cool stuff. So here's my take on Google. Less than 2 years ago, they released their first model. It was called Bard. I don't know if you remember
Yes, I
that,
remember,
Mando.
yeah.
And if you asked Bard to generate an image of the American forefathers, they would generate an image that looked very much unlike the American forefathers. They were weird colors and ethnicities. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it was historically inaccurate. So the point I'm making is Google fell flat on their face right at the start. They were out of the game before they were even in it. And the ascent and innovation that I've seen at that company over the last 2 years has been insane, to the extent that they have one of the best coding models. Number two, and I hate to say this, they have the best AI model. I don't use it because for other reasons, for ChatGPT and memory and stuff, but Google technically has one of the best models out there. And for a third reason, which is they've built their model in a very unique way. So if you think about OpenAI, ChatGPT, that's one model, right? And then they have an image generation thing, and it's kind of the same model, but not really. With Google, they feed everything back to the same model. So it kind of gets collectively smarter at different things when they launch new features. So it's like this big positive feedback loop that's happening. And basically last week, they demonstrated this at their Google, I think it was Made by Google event in New York. And they announced a bunch of different things, mainly 8 new AI applications and features that you can now use on any Android phone and their new Google phone that they're launching. And one thing that appealed to me specifically during that live stream and announcement, Mando, is they're features that you would actually use, right? I'll give you an example.
Translation one, right? That one looked wild.
Yeah. So yeah, you can have a live conversation with someone that doesn't understand your language and you don't understand theirs. Let's say, in my case, I'm speaking to someone that speaks fluent Chinese, right? But I want to have a conversation with them. So I pick up the phone and I'm having a call with this person. It translates everything they're saying in Chinese into English, but it's not a robotic voice. It sounds exactly like them. They're like copying their voice, their tones, and everything. It's pretty insane. The other one I really liked was, do you have an iPhone, Mando, by any chance?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Okay, so you know when you're texting someone, they have predictive text, right? And so it kind of like predicts the next word, and it's kind of useful, but it's like whatever. Now they have this feature called predictive AI, where you don't even need to be texting. You could be on any app, and it predicts the next action that you want. And that sounds kind of like whiffy to an extent, but it actually really works. It like reads your mind in a very obscene way that you can kind of just like kind of tap buttons and you don't really type anything anymore. It's pretty insane. And the point I'm making is Google's really nailed the model, and that's what they've kind of done over the last 2 years. But now they're starting to nail consumer. And if I was Apple, who have been sitting back for the last 2 years as well, saying we're going to update Siri, we're gonna give it AI and all these kinds of things, and have consistently failed at that, I'd be concerned. I'd be worried. Now, I'm not throwing my iPhone out anytime soon,
This
but
phone
this
looks
is
insane.
a valid concern.
This phone
Yes.
looked insane when I saw it. Like the sort of things that you could do, and like I know it takes a lot to move away from Apple, but it does feel like they're slightly slow on this AI move. And it's not, like you said, it's not just one thing. Like one thing I've noticed is the best video model that everyone uses is the
VO.
Google model, right? Like all these adverts that you see from all these different like AI generated adverts, that they're all Google. And then the image one that they brought out this week has now become the most popular image one. And I don't think anyone's gonna have a monopoly for a while, but I've just been very impressed, and I do think they've got a shot now with this hardware side of stuff as well. Apple's probably got to catch up, it feels like.
Well, just a brief comment on the competitors, right? So Apple hasn't trained their own model, and they've been rumored to be in talks with Google themselves to basically lease their model to feed into Siri, which, if they did do that, would be a huge kind of like loss or knock on confidence on Apple's AI capabilities. And then if you look at OpenAI, which was the cherished child of this industry, they launched GPT-5, I think,
Sucks.
3 weeks ago. dude, it sucks.
I
It's terrible.
was GPT through and through, and then now I'm just like, and I don't know. This doesn't really feel like an
Yeah,
improvement. A couple of models.
and you hear a bunch of the fanboys saying, "Ah, well, you're not prompting it correctly," and to an extent, they are correct. But sorry, for 90% of users of ChatGPT, you can't be coming to them saying, "Hey, sorry, you've got to learn this art of prompting." You need to make it dead easy for the majority of people who are trying to like consume AI versus just create with AI. So yeah, I think they've lost their kind of steam, and they're kind of like scrapping for some other new features that they might want to join. I'm talking about OpenAI specifically. We're going to start seeing a lot of these companies launch consumer-facing features and products. I think the model releases are going to slow down. Google's going to come out with Gemini 3 over the next couple of weeks, and then I think that'll be the last major model release for a bit, if I were to guess.
Right. What about Meta? We spoke about them last time. They spent whatever
Oh yeah.
untold amounts of money hiring
Oh.
different people. Has there been any sort of movement in like return on capital there? Or is it just like now we just hope?
Yeah, it's been movement in the other direction, Mando.
Already?
So they okay. So for context here, they spent last time I came on, they had spent $2.5 billion to hire 6 people.
Yeah.
They had also invested 15 to 20 billion dollars in this company called Scale AI to basically acquire 26 of their team. So we're kind of like hitting like what 35 to 50 people in total, and they'd spent north of like 22 billion dollars to acquire those people. So now you're like, okay, they're taking a big bet. They better come up with something good. And granted, we need to give them a bit more time to cook, right? So whatever that model might be. What you don't want to see is 3 of their key hires leave 2 weeks within joining. And that's what we saw this week.
Yeah. This is like football
2.
salaries, right? Like, what do they leave?
They left, and there are many reasons why they might have left. I don't know. I haven't spoken to them, but the rumor that's been floating around consistently is like they weren't enthused or inspired by the mission that they were going for, and a lot of them have either gone back to OpenAI or been poached by our boy Elon Musk for XAI. So the reverse is happening. Yeah.
More difficult to play. I mean, you have Tesla, but obviously he has several different vehicles. It feels like now where he's like using AI, so it's more difficult to play Elon's AI bets. It feels like if you were in terms of the public ways to play right now, are you basically saying you feel strongest with what Google's been doing? I know Nvidia had earnings this week, and it was mixed, strong earnings, but maybe uncertain outlook.
Yeah.
What's your favorite play? Let's say in terms of trades, or is that more difficult to judge?
Yeah, so my basket is Nvidia, Google, and Tesla, and those are I've stack ranked that as if we would do crypto majors. So Nvidia is your BTC, Google's your ETH, and Solana is the Tesla bet. That's basically how I'm reading it. And just to kind of comment on the Tesla point, I actually think Elon's other companies, like the robots that he's building under Tesla, like all his SpaceX stuff, the satellites that he's releasing via Starlink. We've seen a lot of the Starship launches this week as well. All of that is going to combine in a wonderful way. Why? Because it's feeding and distributing data, and data is all that matters when it comes to how good your AI model is right now. If you look at any conversation at top tier AI teams right now, it's not like, how much money do I have to train the model? It's always like, what data do I use? Because they've already exhausted all the internet's data already. So now they're trying to figure out how they can create better data that can like create better models and features. And that's all that matters right now. And Tesla's pretty well wound up right now. And obviously all these other companies aren't yet public, but that's the main way to play it.
And I guess your controversial take is, I mean, obviously all the Mag 7 have bounced back pretty well since April, but is Apple looking the most precarious here?
Okay. So here's my hot take. I think Apple's actually a good buy over the next 6 months.
Okay.
Well, actually over the next couple of weeks, because you've got Tech-tember coming up, September's tech month or whatever, right? I'm kind of looking at this as like the bottom of Apple for AI, because I think they're going to make a serious move within the next 6 months. And the serious move, if I had to guess, would be one of the following.
I mean, it has to be
the most unlikely. Okay, right. The most unlikely I was going to say is they launch their own base model. I don't think that's happening. The talent isn't there. Number two is exactly what you just said, Mando. They acquire someone. Now the question is, who did they acquire? There's not many candidates that they could kind of go for. The one that's been rumored is Perplexity. Perplexity doesn't have a base model, but who cares? And then the third guess, right, and this is slightly long term, is Apple doesn't really play at the complex hardware level. Sure, they make their own phones and all that kind of stuff, but they have always been about what can give you the best aesthetics and user kind of interface. What's the best product experience? What makes people be like, wow, I love Apple? Like I just said it earlier, right? Google has the best model. So why am I still using OpenAI? Why do I still have my iPhone? Why don't I just throw it away and get Android? Because there's a stickiness about it. All my friends are using it, right? And they're so good at that. And I think it would be a bad bet to bet against Apple nailing it for the AI stuff. And no one's nailed it at the consumer AI level. They've nailed the models, the nerdy stuff, right? The Nvidia GPUs, but no one's really nailed the app experience yet. And I bet Apple might.
Can I peel that back a little bit? Because I know you
Yeah.
also have the view that we're going to really change our interfaces quite a lot. Like, do you think the browser is the age of the browser is over? The age of just your standard phone might be over. And I agree with you. Apple probably has a strength. I mean, they tried with the VR headsets. It hasn't really gone anywhere. But what is the hardware you think of the future? Or is it too early to tell?
Dude, that is a literal $1 trillion question.
God,
if I knew that, I'd be a rich man.
Perfect.
Yeah, I know. That's a good question. Okay, so Josh, my co-host of Limitless, and I have gone back and forth on this before. Here's where we land, and I'll summarize it. It's going to be a new form factor, a new hardware device. It's not going to be your cell phone. Okay. It's going to have cameras all over it. It's going to have some form of hearing functionality all over it. And it's going to be subtle. So it's not going to be Google Glass. You're not going to look like you're 30 years in the future or whatever, 100 years in the future in a spaceship. It's going to be something a little more subtle. Maybe it's a little disc that sits on your desk or can sit in your pocket and can hear and see anything. Obviously, if it sits in your pocket, it's not going to see anything, but you get the vibe that I'm going. Maybe it's an earbud that has cameras, like these AirPods, right? It's going to be something like that. And the reason why I say that is it needs to have more sensory information than just words. It can't just listen to you. It needs to be able to read in your mind. It needs to be able to plug into all of your LLM conversations, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't get satisfied by a phone. This is incredibly clunky. And the other point is it needs to feed you information in real time. So it needs to be super accessible. That's why I think it's going to be some kind of visual element. That's the bet that Meta is taking, by the way. They're rumored to be announcing their new AI glasses that are going to cost $800, which is a lot cheaper than most people thought. It's cheaper than an iPhone next month, right? Whereas OpenAI
Glasses
is taking...
I always find the glasses, like, I like what you're saying, but I feel like it needs to look more like a Whoop or an Aura ring than a glass. That's what I kind of feel like.
Well, he's launching two products. You have the glasses and this motion sensor wristband that goes around you. And you can make subtle gestures with your fingers that intuitively change the interface on your glasses. So you can like have your hands in your pocket and still be able to kind of like access a conversation or a notification whilst I'm having a conversation with you in real life, Mando, which is a pretty insane thing to say. Then again, I don't really see everyone wearing glasses suddenly all of the time. And that's a huge like fashion thing and all that kind of stuff. So I agree with you. It's going to be something more subtle. But just to give folks an idea of where it's going, and I have kind of strong conviction that this is going to be the end form factor, an end being like 50 to 100 years, maybe even sooner. It's chips in your brain. That's literally what it is. It's what Neuralink is building. It's what Sam Altman and OpenAI just invested in another company. I think it's called Merge. That's literally doing the same thing. It's a Neuralink competitor. That's what it all ends up, right? You don't need to pick up a device. You just think something and it happens. Yes, that's exactly it, right? So what the middle form factor looks like over the next 50 years, I have no idea, but I think it's going to be something a little more sleek.
Yeah, I've gone down that rabbit hole a little bit with all the gene modification and the idea of having like bionic organs, and you can create superhumans pretty quickly, it feels like.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, we won't go down that just yet. Let's kind of bring it back to some of the other stuff that you spoke about last week, because I think we went about 50 years in the future. Let's bring it back to what's busy right now. Last time we spoke about prediction markets, and that's bring it back to crypto. That's probably been the biggest trend in degen crypto, I think, over the last 2 weeks. You've seen the number of on-chain traders on Solana go from about 8 million to 1 million. So it dropped about 80%. And at the same time, that hasn't really affected, I mean, Solana's doing okay, even with that happening. But the main thing that people are talking about again right now is prediction markets. You've seen Polymarket and Kalshi both do big deals, either with exchanges or sports books recently. And in terms of mind share, it's actually overtaken from memes over the last 2 to 3 weeks. What's your view? Is the hype justified, do you think, or do you think people are going to be slightly disappointed in kind of the end result here? Do you think prediction markets are going to be as big as people think?
Do I think prediction markets are going to be as big as people think? Yes, but it's going to take way longer than what people are making it out to be. So the hype isn't justified in the near term, but it's justified over the long term. And my thesis is pretty simple. People increasingly like to gamble on stuff. And I'm not just talking about gambling addicts. I'm talking about the general trend of Gen Z, millennials, online purchasing, shopping, Labubu trends. It's all some form of kind of vague gambling. Basically, you don't know what you're going to get, but you're excited about what's going to happen. And I think that prediction markets kind of combines social scrolling and what information you're receiving. That's why you hop on Instagram. That's why you hop on X. You want to hear different types of opinions, breaking news, all that kind of stuff. But the issue is, in an age of AI, all of this stuff can get easily manipulated. You don't really know what's true, right? And so one of the main narratives of prediction markets is it's a truth-seeking machine. And we saw that play out at one of the biggest events ever, which was the political presidency elections in the US, right? Where Polymarket basically guessed that Trump was going to win it well before all the other pollsters, traditional pollsters, did as well. So there's some legitimacy behind it. But there are a lot of challenges that haven't yet been overcome yet that needs to be, if we want to kind of scale this up beyond like some long tail kind of app that never really kind of makes it. And that's liquidity. So if you go onto a lot of these prediction markets, like, this particular football team is going to beat this other team, right? The liquidity is usually quite low. And there are two reasons behind that. Number one, the UX is terrible. I like Polymarket and I like Kalshi, but there's too many clicks needed to get to the point of like, okay, I put my money in. Now I'm going to see how much money I make. So I think the UX needs to improve massively. But number two, the liquidity. So the market makers, the bid and ask side on either side is terrible. I went on a prediction market yesterday, Mando, and I put down $100. I was like, I think Google Gemini. It was a prediction market that said, will Google release their new model in the next 2 weeks? And I was like, yeah, I think they might. I put down $100 and it moved the market like 20%. Why? Why on earth would it do that for $100? So it's an issue and it needs to somehow get resolved. Yeah.
This is 100% the issue. They don't share liquidity, right?
Yeah.
So, and often they have a long tail of markets. So how a traditional sportsbook would work is there's only a certain number of games happening. Yeah, there's loads of games happening, but there's only a certain number of games happening. And generally, you can kind of share the liquidity somewhat of both sides if you're a sportsbook provider, because you kind of know you're always going to make the spread on the trade. With a lot of these, there's no way to hedge. You really have to face somebody else, or the liquidity that's being provided needs to be incentivized to stay there. Like, you have to find the other person willing to take the bet that you are that Google isn't going to bring out their model in 2 weeks. And it's not with traditional sports books. There's also often a way to like hedge big delta exposures. Like if you are an operator and you are massively on the line for like Chelsea to win a football game, you can go out and kind of hedge your exposure if you wanted to. Whereas here, like if someone were to put on a huge amount of size on that exact Google bet, there's no one else taking that bet. So I think this is kind of the issue, is that like I see a lot of good takes that this is going to be a big deal, but I think it's going to have to center around a smaller number of markets, or we need to find a new way of sharing liquidity between the protocol to ensure that people can have bets on kind of everything. So what I have seen is that in terms of percentage of winning wallets, prediction markets is about 10 to 20%, which is higher. Perp trading is about 5 to 10%. Meme coin trading is 2 to 3%. So people can make money. It's not 100x gains, because obviously that's just generally not how the market works. But it does feel as though there is, now that everyone's lost so much money on meme coins and it's kept on going, it feels as though this is, if you just want to gamble, like you said, if we are in this gambling super cycle of Gen Z coming in and knowing that the only way for them to make sometimes, $100,000 isn't to work for 10 years or whatever it is, it's to do more of this gambling. I do think it's going to find a place. We just need to find a better model. And to be fair, these haven't been going on for that long. It feels as though this is kind of the DeFi summer of prediction markets, and we're going to see so many things happen over the next few years to kind of optimize that exact model. So I agree with you there.
So it kind of reminds me a little of what NFT trading was like in the early days before Blur came along. Do you remember? Then Blur
100%.
came along and they had an incentive program, and that weirdly had the effect of driving liquidity for a very illiquid asset class, right? You could pretty much dump your pudgy penguins or whatever easily versus listing it on OpenSea and waiting a couple of days to see whether anyone would bite. I think we're going to see a similar trend emerge around prediction markets, because someone needs to solve the liquidity problem. And I feel like that's an attractive enough opportunity where there's big bucks coming around it that is worth solving. Now, the other side of the coin that we haven't spoken about for prediction markets is the legal gray area that they operate in. Currently, you've got Polymarket that is like on-chain and blah, 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 but it's technically not legal or available for the US users. Now, this week, we saw a big bit of news, which was Trump's son. I forgot what his name is.
I think Trump Jr. Eric.
Yeah, Trump. Yeah, Eric. Yep.
It's either Eric or Trump Jr. Either one.
Yeah. I think it's Eric Trump. He has a fund which made a huge investment in Polymarket. So, without reading too much into it, that probably signals a lot of trust from the Trump presidency, and possibly a route is planned forward for getting Polymarket public in the US and available for US users. And in fact, Shane Copland, the founder of Polymarket, announced that in his tweet when he announced the funding. He's saying, we're on the path towards enabling this for US users. So there's some legal stuff that's being solved there. But the other bit of big news,
Kalshi
has it. Exactly. Yeah. And the other bit of news around this as well is, I think a $15 million investment was made into this new company called The Clearing House, whose aim is to make legally available on-chain prediction markets. And this team is comprised of ex-Kalshi and ex-Polymarket people. And I wouldn't be mentioning this team if it weren't for the investors behind it, which is like Coinbase Ventures, Union Square Ventures, and some other big firms. So we're starting to see like major investment from the VC side on this. So again, I think in the near term, it's kind of frothy, but over the next year or so, we're going to start to see some real products, liquidity gets solved. So I'm excited about it. I don't really know where the investment opportunity is beyond like a few random on-chain products, but there's no public way to play it just yet. So yeah, I'm not sure.
You can either get involved in these prediction markets. I do think there's some, particularly where they meet crypto, like when the price, or often it's like, will the price of Bitcoin be 110K? Like they move much slower than the traditional market. So I think there is some gaming there. One thing we also saw this week was that the US says it's going to start putting some of its economic data on chain. I think it started from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's going to be a few others, things like GDP, non-farm payrolls, I reckon, in time. I don't know the exact list of economic data, but they're going to start doing doing this, and they're going to do it on many different chains. One thing I do think is that could be quite a big thing that people bet on each week. I remember being on trading floors where you used to bet on non-farm payrolls each week amongst each other as traders. That was very, very popular. And I also think it could extend to key earnings results, because I think a lot of people, for example, for Nvidia this week, right, they would actually just prefer to bet on what the EPS is going to be rather than own the stock. It has a good EPS and then the stock goes down. Like, people often are just looking for those 0-day gambling things. And at the moment, sometimes the stock market doesn't provide the perfect game for them. And I think that you could see this extend to both economic data like PC inflation we had today. You could bet on that, but also on key earnings. I reckon we could see this a lot. You probably are going to get into the world of needing regulation for this sort of stuff, given the ability for inside information on that could be pretty big. But if you believe in the gambling super cycle, I think we'll find a way at some stage that you can start doing that soon.
I think that's a great take. No comments. I actually haven't heard that take around, like earnings and stuff like that, but it makes complete sense. People like to gamble on it anyway, indirectly through stocks and Mag 7 movements before a weekend ends and when a new week starts. So why wouldn't they do it on all the minutia? Yeah.
And I think they know that sometimes they get rugged. Like, they'll say, "Oh, I earnings are good. I bought the stock," and then the stock opens down. They're like, "No!" Like, clearly inside beforehand. Like, they just prefer just to gamble on it. But the big gainers people saw from this were things like Link. We've spoken about that on this podcast before. I was a little bit more bullish on that. I continue to think that as an Oracle service will be big. Pith, which was the Solana version, was up like 100%, I think, yesterday on that news. But it does feel like these oracles are increasingly being tied in with TradFi and various other forms of let's say the establishment, which can provide another business line for them. So I think there could be something interesting there. The final thing I wanted to touch upon was Sandbox. This was a story that I know you came up kind of in the NFT days as well, and you have your CryptoPunk, but Sandbox was back in the days of the metaverse was spoken about as the next big thing. I don't know where it topped out as a coin, but it was definitely in the billions. This week they announced that the founders are being sidelined. They're cutting 50% of the staff. I think the coin is down 95% from its peak, and I don't know if they're continuing with the metaverse or there was something about like they're going to do a token launch pad instead. But I thought it was very interesting because this is at a time where I don't think the metaverse is necessarily dead. And I think it's something that I've listening to you and the content you create, it's something that you believe too. Like, with these new world generation models, we're actually getting much closer to it. It just feels like these sort of old versions of it might be dead. What's your view on the Sandbox and just like the metaverse in general?
Yeah, so you mentioned something called world simulators. So for those of you who don't know what that is, think of a AI video model that generates an image, right? So let's say it generates an image of a person standing in a forest, but now you can move that person around like it was a video game, and it generates new worlds and new perspectives and new views of that person as you kind of pan the camera around. And it does this in real time. So think about like kind of like a video game, but it generates in real time. Super powerful things can be done with this. You could simulate environments for robots to train on, or you could create like a new kind of like role-playing game that can merge with another unit. Really cool things. And so the point we're making here is, with AI models, with image generation models, with all the Google stuff, with all the new hardware devices that are going to come out, we're kind of creating what we have PTSD from, which is the metaverse, right? And the metaverse is a pretty cringe term, but that's effectively describing a new type of internet where we interact with the online world in a very different way. If you've watched Ready Player One, it's probably something along those lines from a visual perspective, right? And then when we look at
the compute power needed for these new models, like, there have been massive leaps, it feels like, even in the last few months on this, right? And the quality and the physics behind some of these models look incredible. Can you maybe just touch upon that little bit?
Of course, yeah. So I'll give you a clear stat actually. So OpenAI, when they released their image generation feature, which went viral, it was hugely popular, but it kept costing them a lot of money back then. And back then was literally like 2 months ago. Google's new image generation feature called Nano Banana, which they released this week, is already 35 times less expensive than that. Actually, it costs less than a Google query does when you search something, which is just insane because typically that figure was 100x 2 years ago. So the cost of compute is getting less. The cost of inference, which is the cost it takes to kind of query something, the AI model, is getting significantly less at an exponential rate, right? Chips are getting better, Nvidia GPUs are getting better, architectures are getting better, data centers are being set up everywhere. So we're going to see this increasing trend of cost go down for these types of things, but the rate of innovation of tech go up. And that is a very dangerous combination and mix of things to happen if you're creating a new kind of visual internet paradigm, a metaverse per se. Now, going back to the example that you started this story with, Mando, which is Sandbox, what's really interesting about this example is, okay, so they're cutting half their staff. They're kind of, it's kind of like a private equity takeover to an extent, right? Cut out all the fluff, kind of reorganize the team, maybe realign the vision to some extent, and get them to hyper focus on one thing. And I read also some of the stories around this that they're using AI, generative AI specifically, to replace a lot of the business functions like marketing, product development, all that kind of stuff. What I like about this is it's kind of like a Carvana rehaul story, right? Carvana is like a trad company, rental company that IPO'd and then it just went to zero, right? And you typically never hear anything about this company before, except that they had a private equity takeover, a complete rehaul, and they hyper focused on one thing, which was like, rental cars and all that kind of stuff, sales, and selling car insurance. And their stock is now like at all-time highs. It was like the biggest comeback story ever. I think we're going to start to see a similar type of thing happen within NFT companies as well. And maybe Sandbox is an example of that. It's too early to say, but I would say it's a positive thing to see.
Yeah, that's a good take. Well, I do think the size of an organization is definitely coming down with AI. I can see it even in the business that we work. But just this exact thing, like I think the ability to spin up. I mean, some of the videos I've seen of the worlds that you can spin up and you can run around and play in them. They seem way more advanced than they were just 6 months ago. I do think suddenly again we can get bullish on this concept of digital ownership a bit more. And we may kind of be returning to this world. I think one of the main issues with some of these metaverse worlds is they felt very stagnant. No one was hanging out in them. They were just kind of a bit boring, and they just didn't really excite anyone. And they often cost a lot. They cost a lot to run. The servers needed, I think, for like you couldn't be in like the server, the same server as a certain number of players in Decentraland, I remember at one stage. Whereas now it feels as though the costs, like you just said, are going to come down significantly. So if you are going to set up a metaverse company, it feels like now is actually maybe the time to do it. So there may be an opportunity there. I think that's an interesting take. Okay, look, we went through a lot different there. I like these shows. We went through ETH, Hype, Google, putting nanochips in your markets. Prediction markets, putting economic data on chain, and then Sandbox. We will get to the questions now. Just before we get there, it was just to say, head over to realvision.com/ready, set, connect. We are giving away Connect memberships on sale at the moment. You'll be able to access myself and OSF's monthly AMA, along with a bunch of other content around crypto. Okay, so the questions that we have coming through now. Mando, I remember you were pretty vocal about your link position. What kind of signals would tell you that the market is getting frothy enough to start taking profit on link? And if that happens, would you look to rotate into something else with momentum or to de-risk into ETH? So what I actually did was de-risk ETH into Bitcoin and a little bit of link. And I've continued to do that. So like Bitcoin has become, I had like a set limit order all the way up to ETH all-time high, where I got out of 75% of the ETH. I moved most of that into Bitcoin, and then I did buy some Link. I do like the Link story. I like it because it's a bit memeable like XRP, but there is kind of a bit of more of a foundation to it than XRP, in my opinion. There's a lot more going on. And out of all the altcoins right now, it's one of the ones I like, alongside, let's say, Hype and obviously REKT and some of the other stuff we're involved in. But I think ETH could have a bit of a shaky couple of weeks. But I do really like that story medium term. But right now, I mainly own Bitcoin and a little bit of Link, and then it kind of goes down from there. ETH, Hype, REKT, all this sort of stuff. Ejaaz. Last time you mentioned a few AI agents that caught your attention. Have any new ones come onto your radar since then? I'm also curious about your thoughts on virtuals and where you see them fitting into the market this cycle.
Okay, so to answer the first question, I mentioned a bunch of trad AI agents, so like OpenAI's agent, Anthropic's agent. The simple answer is no. I haven't seen any new agents get released by those companies or any kind of major crypto AI companies. And I think the reason behind that is they have some challenges to overcome, right? So one of the main ones is coordination. So right now, a lot of these agents operate in silos and they don't really talk well to each other. And then number two is tool use. So you can right now connect an agent to a bunch of different tools and apps that you use, but they kind of don't really know what to do with it. The context is lacking. And I actually think I mentioned this on the last episode that I was on. So we're still in that same case, and we're waiting to see someone create something much better. Now, the good news is it is still very much the favored path going forwards. Eventually, every AI company is going to have agents and they're going to be working seamlessly together. We just haven't quite materialized how that looks like right now. And then what was the question about virtuals specifically?
Just if you still think they're going to be a leader in this space. I know they kind of pivoted to being more of a marketplace, and then I don't know if that's continued to be as strong. It felt like they had a good head start, but I don't know now.
Yeah, so I think the hope with virtuals was that they would evolve beyond just a marketplace and launchpad to build something more like a foundational app platform. I haven't seen that happen just yet. I know they're doing a lot with their agent protocol, which is like, a network of different agents. We haven't seen any meaningful traction, or nothing that's impressed me at least. So for now, I would say no. Yeah.
And you last said that you were looking at prediction markets meets AI agents. There was already an existing AI agent that was doing that. How's that been going? Is it still a little bit nascent for that as well?
It's still nascent, but I do think that the opportunity for agents to basically market make long tail markets, prediction markets, so ones with low liquidity, is the way forward. I don't think it makes sense for humans to kind of try and bid or make those markets. So yes, the opportunity is there, but it's still nascent in terms of progression.
Yeah, I know someone who's building a prediction market right now, and they are building it exactly for AI agents. They think that they are just going to be dominating the amount of flow going through pretty soon. Final question: is the real trade in the infrastructure and energy? I think this is to do with AI. Is the real trade in AI the infrastructure and energy rather than the application layers that will be commodified as software eats itself? I think I saw you do an interview about nuclear energy this in the last month or so. What's your take on the infra and energy needed for all these AI applications, and is that the best trade?
It has been the winning trade since AI went viral with GPT-3. It's been like that for like 3 years now. And to be fair, it's consistently outperformed. A lot of bears have said, no, it's over. Nvidia's topped. No, they haven't. S&P 500 reached a new high yesterday, right? So Nvidia is still very much the big boy, and it'll continue to be. Nvidia is rumored to be striking a deal with the presidential cabinet to sell to China, which was formerly the enemy, and that was been restricted. So I think Nvidia's power will continue to grow. I think things like nuclear energy plants and stuff will become very important. The point is, like, there can never be too much compute. It is, for those Dune lovers, Dune the movie, it is the spice. You need the compute.
Spice must flow.
The spice must flow. And so there'll always be demand for energy. That's not going to change. The nuclear stuff is probably going to come to maturity only in 2030 to 2035 onwards. So there's a bit of a delay then, because you got to set these things up, get them regulated. So that's not really a play anytime soon. But then I do think we're going to see, and I mentioned this earlier, I think we're going to see a lull in model improvements, because for so long, everyone's been like, oh, we're going to find AGI. AGI is coming soon, 2027. I don't think we're anywhere near that. I think it's going to be, actually, I think we said this on this show. I think I guessed that it was going to be 2030, maybe onwards. And again, I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but I think we're going to see a lull in model releases after Google's Gemini 3. And we're going to see more applications get built. OpenAI hired a new CPO of apps. Google Gemini released 8 new apps this week. We're going to see more apps. Some of them are going to go viral, and then we're going to see that kind of like cycle again. So you're going to have infrastructure investment, app investment, infrastructure investment, app investment. It's that, whatever, that Gartner cycle or whatever it is.
Yeah, because I'm right in saying that even statistically, it's only been like 2 to 3% improvements in some of these more recent models, right? It's like we've got about ChatGPT 5, and it's like 1% better than the last model, and
exactly.
People are feeling that. And I also think, obviously, the stock market's also asking, like, when are we actually going to start making money out of this, guys? Which I think needs apps. I agree with you there.
Yep.
Okay, Ejaaz, it was awesome having you on again. Hopefully, we'll have you on again soon, in maybe a month. Obviously, Ejaaz does a weekly and I think bi-weekly, right? You do it twice a week. Podcast / show. It's called Limitless. Go check it out. It's a great show, mainly around AI, but obviously you can also find him on X. He has a hoodie CryptoPunk, so you know he's cool. But yeah, thanks for coming on again, Ejaaz. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Okay, guys. Well, we will see you again next week. We will be at our usual time at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. British Summer Time. That was REKT Vision, and we'll see you again next week. Bye, guys.
See ya.
So here we are, Token 2049. It really is one of the most energetic, incredible events. Speakers from all around the world and visitors from every country you can ever imagine, all trying to learn something together, something new, this exciting world of crypto and technology. It's where you go and make friends, lifelong friends. And what's so nice is to see people with big smiles on their faces, happy to be here and happy to be together. So hopefully see you next time in Singapore. Real Vision will be there. I look forward to seeing you all.